All right, good morning or afternoon. Today is February 2nd, and we are moving into this animal chapter. This should be your first warm-up with 7 questions. Hopefully you figure that out. So on your warm-up page, whether it is green or yellow, you would have written 2, 2, 21, and 7 questions. I would actually write that this is warm-up number 1 as well, so you can keep track of that. And question number 1, the 2 main groups of animals on the planet. This might have been one of the harder questions because I don't think I went into detail on it with every class. So last time I saw you, which was a long time ago, we looked at what we were going to be talking about in this chapter, which is actually all of these groups. But I started talking just about the sponges and the cnidarians. And I told you we would do flat, round, and segmented worms. We're also going to do the squishies, the crunchies, and actually crunchy, and the spinies. But the group I'm referring to, these are all invertebrates. There are way more of these on the planet than vertebrates. 98% of the life on the planet is an invertebrate, and you can think about like that day that ants like took over your house. How many were there? There was a lot compared to the vertebrates, and this is the other group. And vertebrates are the fish, amphibians, the mammals, reptiles, and birds. So there's way less of these on the planet, but those are the 2 main groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. Have a backbone and a spinal cord versus invertebrates, which are all of the squishies and crunchies of the planet. So in your warm-up paper then, the 2 main groups, you would write invertebrate and vertebrate. Which are there more of? These guys by a landslide, specifically insects. There are so many of those that there's just so many more of these than this. This is what you're used to seeing though, like at the zoo, because they're bigger. Number 3, what is the phylum name for sponges? That is Porifera, and it means full of holes or full of pores. All animals eat at some point. What is the name of the cell that the sponges use to eat? Those are called collar cells, which of course is written in the next question. We're going to draw a sponge. I always start with a bigger circle and a smaller circle. Sponges are lined with little spikes, which you're going to look at under the microscope today. These little things are called spicules. They have a ton of holes, just like a real sponge does. When I say a real sponge, I mean a fake one that you buy at the store. And these holes are pores, which is where porifera comes from. Water would get sucked in here and it comes into this opening. This is an empty space in here. It's like a giant vase. And when water comes in, so does plankton, which are little microscopic living things. And that could be the larva of a fish, the larva of a crab, it could be single-celled algae. Whatever gets sucked into here gets eaten up and filtered out by these little cells called collar cells. That's called filter feeding. Hopefully that word makes sense because they're filtering out the plankton. Collar, like a dog collar, cells. And then whatever's left over is clean water that comes out the top. And that opening right here is called the osculum. And then the other group we talked about was the cnidarians, which means stinging cells. And remember, this is not a fish or any type of stingray because those have a backbone. Those are vertebrates, and that's later this chapter. The ones that might sting you are jellyfish. If you stick a jellyfish upside down and attach it to the ground, you'd get a sea anemone. I told you a story about how they can in fact sting you if you allow them to get past your skin. A good way to experience that is to lick it. Your tongue doesn't have a thick layer of skin. Sea anemones, when you touch them, are definitely trying to kill you and eat you. but your skin doesn't allow the barbs to get through your skin because it's too thick. So it feels sticky or like you're touching tape because you're getting stuck to all their barbs. Obviously, a fish or something's getting stung, and a neurotoxin shuts down your nervous system. So basically, it paralyzes whatever it's stinging. Coral, which I showed you a picture of. Coral is a whole bunch of mini sea anemones. You'll see today in the lab coral up close, and you'll see the little spaces where each little baby polyp lives in the coral and they eat. And then in the lab today, you'll see something called a hydra. It's like a microscopic sea anemone. It'll have like a little red body like this and these little tiny tentacles that come out. Okay, so that's 4. You could have listed any 3 of things that can sting you. So we're going to talk about worms for a sec. Then you are going to do a lab. There's 3 of them. Flat, which has a stupid long name. Round. And segmented, which is annelid. Segmented. So these are the 3 types of worms. All worms need to live in a moist place. Some are parasitic, some aren't. This is the least complex, more evolved, way more evolved. They have 5 hearts at this point. They've got a brain, so they have a full nervous system, including a brain. They have a nerve cord running down the belly, not their back, so they are still an invertebrate. They have a mouth and a separate anus. That sounds weird. Food goes in and then out a separate place. That's actually a big deal. Evolutionarily, this was a big step. If you look at flatworms, the mouth and the anus are the same place, just like the sea anemone. So flatworm, you're going to see one today during your lab. Flatworms can be parasitic, which means that they can feed off of like your intestines. But the one I brought today at the lab is not parasitic. It has 2 little eye spots, and they are crossed. This is called a planarian. For some reason, to me, it looks like it should be named Gary. Or Steve, either one. When you see the real ones, which are coming in the mail, when they get to the classroom, when we get back from break, you'll see them, and you'll be like, whoa, that guy is named Gary. He has a mouth. Food goes in, and then it comes back out the same place. This is a one-way digestive system. And when the worms were evolving, by the time roundworms came along, they have a 2-way, just like segmented. Roundworms are very, very small and round. These are all test questions. Which worm has a one-way digestive system? That's Platyhelminthes, the flatworm. I will be giving you an awesome way to remember this in class. And this has 2 and that has 2. This is a flat. Tapeworms are an example, which you'll see today in class. So most flatworms are parasitic. Thing with round. There are only a few that are not parasitic. And I told you the story in class about that guy who had a roundworm in his eye, and another time when I found a roundworm in a dolphin's brain that had just died. And I will show you pictures of that dolphin that I had to dissect. Roundworms are crazy. They can survive in extreme places. So examples that you're going to look at in the lab of worms. For flatworms, I have a tapeworm, and I have the planarian. For roundworms, I have something called Ascaris. Those get pretty big. Those are not microscopic. And we'll talk about that. We have something called Trichina, which you can find in uncooked pork meat, and I have a slide that shows that worm in pork under a microscope. It's disgusting. They live in little cysts, and you'll see like a little swirly worm in there. And the other one I have is called vinegar eel. It's not an eel. It's a worm. Super tiny, obviously, it lives in vinegar. And then during the lab, for segmented worms, I have a leech, which is a segmented worm, and yes, they have a bunch of segments, and a earthworm.
All right, I'm going to stop here and you can go start your lab.
And the lab is around the back of the room, and it is a yellow paper, and you have to go around the room, and please do what the lab says. There are cards out that tell you what you're looking at. The window with all, I'm sorry, the wall with all the windows is where all of the worms are. The wall with the black and green posters with all the human stuff up, that wall has all of the sea anemones, and it has the sponges. So it has sponges over there, and then it starts the sea anemone stuff, and then it has more of these as you go around the back wall. So it's all around the back of the room too. Please, please, please keep your distance from other people as you move around the room. Do not crowd one station. That would be breaking our social distancing.